Welcome to the 28th edition of Women's Wrestling Weekly, the show. I am Kyle Klingman, along with Scott D. Beck, and the name is Audrey Jimenez.
I'm Audrey Jimenez. I'm from Tucson, Arizona.
Brazil Marquez, the head coach at Lehigh, roasted me a little bit because I have struggled with Jimenez. Audrey Jimenez defeated Guzman from Cuba. And if you remember last year, she won an Olympic silver medal. It was that whole situation where she lost in the semifinals to Fogat from India. Fogat didn't make weight, and then she got put into the finals against Sarah Hildebrandt. Hildebrandt won 3-0. Completely different match. Guzman came out on fire and scored the first 6 points, looked
Yeah.
fantastic. And it looked like Jimenez just was off her game.
She weathered the storm. Guzman's very tough. She's getting seasoned, having obviously an Olympic medal gives you some confidence. And I think, what you saw is Audrey survived it. After getting blitzed, I think the conditioning came in. But you see with leg lacers, and I think another good example of this, if you look at Laurence Beauregard from Canada, 59 kilo, when she wrestled Alma Valencia from Mexico. And you and I were actually watching the match and talking together. And Valencia, who had beaten Helen Maroulis in the Pan-Am, and made the Olympics in the Pan-Am qualifier. What you see with lacers, and Valencia did a great job defending it, but we said, I don't know if she's going to be able to keep defending it. So she defended it one time in parterre, the second time. The third time, Beauregard got her and tacked her and ended the match. And with Jimenez, you see that. The really good lacers like her, Sarah Hildebrandt, really good lacers. You may survive the first time, but you got to be on your game every time you're down, or it's just a matter of time. And especially, it takes a lot out of you defending that lace, and you saw that with Audrey. She's special. I think the one thing, she's still young. She's a little small for the weight. Hopefully she'll get a little bigger, more muscular. And, she's still, not fully developed too. So there's some beasts at 50 kilograms out in the world, Japan's solid 4 deep. Mongolia is exceptionally good. It's beaten Sarah a couple of times. So I'm not, we're massive fans. I think she's got a really good chance to make her team. I'm not going to count out Golson, but right now, Jimenez is sitting in the finals, and she's the future at the weight class, clearly. I'm not anointing her world champion. She's going to have to, let's just give her a break. Let her do her thing, and she's very impressive.
You mentioned the size. She did look undersized against Guzman and Maddie Parks, who she met in the finals. Parks from Canada. Parks looked like she was 57 kilograms next to Jimenez. I just thought her size, her presence. She wrestled a decent match. It was 2-2, and then Jimenez got the fall. But I just think that's one of the storylines you're going to have to see is how does she contend against those wrestlers who are a little bit bigger? If they ever went down to a 48 kilos again, perfect for
or
Jimenez.
even 49 would help her. She'll also, she'll fill out. She will. I don't know if she's ever going to, gain in height, but she will, mature a little and fill out. And, some wrestlers are good enough to win. She will ultimately win anyway, regardless of if she's a little undersized. But, Fang from China, she's big. And she's very tough. So 50 is a very tough weight class in the world. So I just think whatever, if she makes a team, when she makes teams, her time will come. We just chill out, let her do her thing. I don't think anybody needs to, put pressure, on her, but she's special for sure.
But as it relates to that 18-8 win over Guzman in the semifinals, anytime you see that type of a score, you have to go back and watch and see what happened. And Guzman really did come out on fire. And that 4-point throw that she hit out of bounds, that was probably a wake-up call for her that she needs to work on some things, on some baseline defense, and make sure that she doesn't get in those situations again. So getting the gold is good, and that's a step, but there's a lot of things she can learn and take away from that tournament.
Absolutely. I think the experience is worth more than the gold medal, to tell you the truth. The Pan-Am gold medal. I mean, her goals are bigger than that, and it's good for her. And it's great that Parks is very seasoned, been around forever. So it's good that she's, some weights in Pan-Ams aren't that good. Some are random, very good. We'll talk about Welker's weight at 76 was exceptionally deep, even at, even like 59 where Nettie took silver. Your Borgo's a 4-time Pan-Am gold medalist, the University world champ. I mean, there was, it's not always deep, but some of the weights are, and it's a meaningful tournament, and it's good experience for sure.
Let's go right into 76 kilograms. And this was brought up to me by Olivia Lichty. The Brazilian who Kylie Welker defeated in the finals was the one that actually threw Amit Elor last year at the Pan Am Olympic qualifier. So she's high level. And both got tired by the end of the match. Again, you have to look at the match. It got out of hand because Kylie Welker was able to put on the heat toward the end of the match, but it was competitive throughout. But I think the most impressive win was that Riasco match in the semifinals where she got the tech, because I think in the first match she didn't look as good. She needed to get that blow. She looked a little bit tired, but I think as the rounds went on, she got progressively better.
Absolutely. And Martin from Brazil, who should be in the finals, and if you recall the Amit match, she threw her and then literally ran away for the rest of the match. But the refs helped her too because she was trying to circle. It was a very interesting match. It says a random aside that match because the refs, she was being passive and back into the edge, and then she'd circle in, but they'd hit her anyway. But Amit was relentless in cutting off. That was a clinic and how to cut it off the match, stay calm after getting thrown and surviving, and just methodically pick her way back and annihilate Martins. But Martins took out Marin from Cuba, who's very good, So, I mean, this was a very deep weight class. It's funny, 76, sometimes 72 can be weak, but 76 for some reason, and especially in the Pan American region, 76 is always a very difficult weight class. It just really is. And Welker looked great. Yeah, she's had a slow start, came on very strong. You and I were like, I mean, in all honesty, we talked and we were a little surprised after the first match, but I guess, yeah, she had to get going, blow it out, and she looked phenomenal in the next two matches against much more difficult opponents than the first round match.
And Martins is a real stocky wrestler, and she was able to get to her legs, and there were times where it was going back and forth, and it was harder to penetrate someone who's that strong, but she was resilient through it all, and you saw how athletic Kylie Welker is.
Yeah, and Marin sure is. I remember seeing her first in 2019 when she won the Junior World Gold in Estonia, and she hit my radar then. And I said, we got to keep an eye on her. And she's been doing well as a senior, and she's very tough. So that was a phenomenal performance. Effort to win that weight class with it was just stacked. I mean, you look at the semis for all four of them were really good.
Kennedy Blades won gold. Didn't look the best she's ever looked. I don't read into that at all, that's going to be a problem. We've seen that where Helen Maroulis dropped a match a couple years ago, and it's no big deal. I just think Kennedy Blades has been on the mat quite a bit. She's making it down to 68 kilos. It's hard to say that domination isn't the best you can look, but we've seen better versions of Kennedy Blades, but I think she's going to be just fine.
100%. I mean, I don't think it's very hard to understand, but when you're wrestling in the college grind season week after week, she's also like, obviously her or Amit, like the biggest names right now, in the youngins coming up. And, there's pressure. And, what we say is that she didn't look the best. She still killed it, solidly wins and it was never really threatened. So, she's fine. And she's been wrestling a lot. So to me, it's, she's fine. It's irrelevant to like judge, micro judge it. She'll be just fine. But it is tough to compete all the time,
Yeah, she's had quite a string here with everything that's going on and the Real American Freestyle promotion that's coming out and college and then US Open and it's quick turnaround. So yeah, and you're making weight, you're in a new weight class, you're getting adjusted. She's going to be right there.
And it's also emotionally, it's like she's she's constantly, she's doing an interview, she's doing this, that. You have to be game on emotionally, physically. It's just, it wears on you, it's hard, I mean, that's one of the, I guess the cost of fame is, people look at you and, and a lot's expected. But, with that, there's pretty good rewards. So,
A couple things that stood out to me. Jaslyn Gallegos looked good in her bronze medal match against someone who I think highly of, Serena Di Benedetto from Canada. She is a U23 world silver medalist last year. She won 16-4. I thought that was as good as she's looked after a sixth place finish at the US Open. And then Louisa Schwab, I liked what she did in the first match. She was down, and you just really saw her resiliency. And she came back and got a fall late, and then won 14-4, and then lost to a very good Carla Godinez from Canada in the gold medal match. So good to see a couple names that you don't necessarily see on top of the ladder all the time get some Pan American Championship medals and returning home with those.
yeah, I mean, she looked at Schwab. I hadn't seen in a long time. And when she wrestled at the U.S. Open, it was like a different looking Schwab, like a chiseled, leaner Schwab, down weight or two, and she looked good. And I'd also say, Cosme, didn't medal, but she had a really tough draw. And, she hits Carla, the big Godinez, who's just really, really, really solid, one of the best in the world at the weight classes, significant wins. So, I don't really feel bad for her, but she's not any less than many of the other participants on that team just because she didn't medal. Like, she's very solid.
Macy Kelty dominates, wins gold at 65 kilograms. Tiffany Boblitz won gold. She had two matches and takes home the title. And also Abby Nettie, who you alluded to. The match that was most interesting was that Lawrence Borgard match. She lost that and then came back and won over Valencia 11-0. Any final takeaways on the Pan American Championships that stood out to you, Scott?
Just in general, to me, I think the competition was a little tougher than I thought. I think the U.S. team was very solid, looked very good overall, with a very good mix of young, kind of newly experienced, medium, and absolute hammers. So it was a great job to the team, to Coach Steiner. Congratulations to everybody.
World Team Trials Challenge Tournament is this weekend in Louisville, Kentucky, and two spots have already been solidified for Final X. That is at 57 kilograms. We will see Helen Maroulis against Amanda Martinez, and at 65 kilograms, we have Macy Kilte against Anya Drury. 8 spots available for Final X, and I think that when you look at this, there's one name that's going to stand out, and that's Amit Elor. It's her return, first competition back from the Olympic Games. She won it at 68 kilograms. Previous 2 senior world championships were at 72, moving back up to that weight, but I'm assuming she's moving back down. She was not at the U.S. Open. I would expect nothing less than for her to win, but it's exciting just to watch and see how she's going to perform.
Yeah, I expect her pretty much to just annihilate everybody. I mean, how can we not? She annihilates everybody in the Olympic Games and the World Championships. Just because she hasn't competed, to me, doesn't mean that she's not in great shape and training and game on. And if anything, she competed a lot. She was doing, if you recall, she was winning, cadet, junior, and senior worlds at the same time, or U23s when she, grew out of, aged out of cadets at the same time. So she's competed a lot in very high level tournaments. And, unfortunately for everybody else, she's in the weight class. It's just what it is. So she'll look very good and be dominant.
There's not many opportunities domestically to see our top stars, so take advantage of this. She's special. She's one of those people that is going to be on the scene for a long time. She's only 21, so this is one of those where you want to watch, want to tune in, you want to watch Amit Elor because what she's going to do is going to be groundbreaking.
Absolutely. Yeah, she's a style that just really shuts people down. She's exceptionally good at what she does, cutting the mat off, digging hooks, controlling center, great gut wrench, great go behind. So she's very difficult for anybody in the world to beat.
53 kilograms is the weight to watch. There are so many entries that could make it to that Final X spot against Brianna Gonzalez, Jaslyn Gallegos, Katie Gomez, Sage Mortimer, Sydney Petzinger, Felicity Taylor, who reached the U.S. Open Finals. I don't even know how to predict this because of what we saw at the U.S. Open, but that's the one you want to circle because I don't know who's going to come out at 53 and face Brianna Gonzalez. If I had to pick, I think that Katie Gomez can make adjustments. I think she's going to win this, but that's just a gut feeling right now.
Yeah, I'd say you'd have to go with Gomez as the favorite, but it's really going to be a dogfight, and any one of five people in theory can win. And I don't really know. I think this is the second time now back down for Gomez. I don't think her second weight cut was great before she lost. I mean, the first, preparing for the second weigh-in. This is going to be definitely the deepest weight of legitimate contenders, I think. So we'll see what happens.
Can't imagine anything other than a Yelena McCoya Diamond Guilford final at 76 kilograms. That's probably on course there. McCoy now has an 8-6 series lead, but that's always a fun matchup. It never gets old seeing that. Let's hope they get to 30.
Yeah, and their matches are more exciting than one would expect for people that know each other that well. There's some really normally they're very like guarded, but there's good sequences within the matches when they each decide to attack. So we'll see how much they open it up, but I'd expect good matches if they get there. But that clearly seems to be the most likely final at 76.
And Guilford's interesting because sometimes you'll see her scores or she may not look great in a match, and then you say, she's ripe to get upset, and then she'll wrestle someone high level and absolutely blitz that person and dominate. So never look at Diamond Guilford's scores and think that that's going to translate to the next match because she can
I
pull
think
the
she
trick.
rises. Yeah, Kyle, she rises to the competition, and when she's game on, she's very difficult to beat for anybody.
At 50 kilograms, it's not a deep weight class. There's not many participants, but we'll get to see what Emily Shilson, and you mentioned her, Erin Golston. She's in her 30s. This is getting down to her last opportunities, and I think probably Erin Golson's to win at this point. She showed what she can do at the U.S. Open, had a tech, and then 3 falls in a row. She looks good right now. Jimenez is just clicking at such a high level right now. It's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Shilson was back for the first time last time. Maybe she's made some adjustments. I'm never going to count her out as a multiple age group world champ. Goldson has kind of had her number a little bit as well. And I have to say Golson's a favorite, and then, versus Jimenez, she's lost 3 times by tech. So we'll see. I mean, I think there's levels in this weight class, and the youth moving, with Kroll and Falcon are both very good, but they're just a little younger at the moment along the levels kind of conversation we've had.
55 and 59, the favorite is Jakara Winchester. And why is that? Because she's entered at 55 kilograms, but we've seen that before where she's entered at one weight class, might move up. So it's hard to predict what's going to happen there. Clearly the favorite at 55 kilograms. She won her world title in 2019 there. And if she can make it down, she wrestled at 57 kilograms, opted out of the finals, which is why Amanda Martinez is sitting in Final X right now because she won the U.S. Open. So right now it says on paper what we see for the registration that Jakara Winchester will go down, but we don't know what will happen there. Either way, she's going to be the favorite at both weight classes.
Yeah, clearly, and she'll be the favorite in either one until she ever picks a weight class or gets beat by somebody, which Father Time's undefeated. But right now, until proven otherwise, she would be a clear favorite in either weight. I think 55 is pretty solid and pretty deep. Other than Jakara, you have a lot of Villascusa, who was a few seconds away from a senior world medal. And then obviously Lidecker is phenomenal with the youth movement. Rana Gross is Heaton is exceptionally experienced, so that's a very weight class. And you go up to 59. I won't talk about that, but I think there's some pretty solid contenders other than Jakar, but clearly until proven wrong, she's the dominant one if she goes there.
62 kilograms of Dugo Wachukwu had the shootout in the semifinals against Alara Boyd. Alara Boyd went down to 6, so it's kind of wide open. But I think if Adugo is on her game and ready to go, has everything under control, I think she's going to be the favorite to make it against Kayla Miracle. We've seen that in the past. She was in Final X in 2023. I just think this is Adugo's time. She's good at this weight class. We've seen some good senior results internationally. I just think that Adugo should win this.
She should. Yeah, I mean, to tell you the truth, the Alara Boyd match with her was surprising to me, and Boyd almost won that match. And Miracle won a very controlled, methodical finals match, and yeah, I'd have to expect Duga to win, and I still stand by what I said that she's not going to beat Kayla Miracle. And Kayla looked very good for her first time back, and just is very sound, but she'll be pushed by Adugo, and again, she'll keep pushing and pushing, but yeah, again, until proven wrong, and Kayla Miracle has beaten Timbukova. She's beaten the best in the world, and she's, to me, a solid number one there. And I'd say Adugo is a solid number two, and I expect her to take care of business.
Solon Piercy made the U.S. Open finals, lost to Kennedy Blades as expected, but I like Solon Piercy's story. She trains by herself, and she is someone that's just stayed with the sport. She had a good World Cup in 2022, has shown some good results. I just like her. I like that she's staying with the sport and just has some consistent results over the course of time, and that she's staying with it. I like that.
Yeah, I mean, and she works for like full time, like a real job. So like this is like borderline, recreational for her, and it's very hard to compete at this level recreationally, as and clearly, especially when you have Kennedy Blades. But I think it would be, great to see her if she can, get to Final X. Brooklyn Hayes is solid and has some good wins, um, internationally as well, and she's, tough, and she's getting better and better. So I'm not just handing this to Piercy, and McBride could be the most dangerous one, now that she can compete without the uniform constraint. For international stuff, she's going to be. Don't write her off. We'll see. How it works out, but there's some. I think it's kind of wide open actually. And then it's next topic. With Kennedy Blades.
I love this process, Scott. It's so fun. You have the U.S. Open, you have the World Team Trials Challenge tournament going into Final X. I'm always excited about how we pick our world teams because it is one of the most difficult things to do to make a U.S. world team because you can't fake the funk. You got to win best of three at Final X. You have to go through a process to get there. I just love this, and we're right in the thick of it. Can't wait.
Yeah, and the way it's kind of structured, it's like if you make the team, you should be in a position, barring a horrible draw or a really, really deep weight class. We if you get through and make our team, you're expected to be competing for a medal. You're battle tested to make our team. They don't hand out, world team memberships. It's very difficult, and I think that's good. And I think also the fact that the reigning world medalist sits in the finals, you got to take out the king of the hill. So I think the structure is good. I like that Final X is 2 out of 3. I like even that you have a world team trials in some of the weights if you've lost in the open and you have a chance to redeem yourself. So yeah, I think the process is good right now.
The recommendation is in for the NCAA Women's Championships in 2026, which will be the first time that women's wrestling will be sanctioned by the NCAA. If you have a chance, go listen to the interview with Jeff McGinnis. He's on that NCAA committee. Did a great job of just breaking things down. We had an article just with some coaches' reactions. So the gist of it is this, and this isn't final yet. There still is another layer before this goes final, but 21 qualifiers, one per weight. So before it was 15, maximum of 15, so a maximum of one per weight. So just like the men's, you can qualify 10 maximum for the NCAA championships, and it would be 7 regionals, and the top 3 in each region go, making the 21 woman bracket. I wish there was 24. I think that's the right number. I know that in talking with Jeff in that interview, he said you just can't get greedy. It was 32. Now we're down to 21. I just think 24 would have been the right number because it's just nice and clean. You'd have 8 first round buys, 8 matches to start things out. It's just a lot cleaner than having 3 pigtails on there. But I just think we're right in what we thought it might be. We talked about the 21 to 24 for a long time. They're going 21 in the recommendation, Scott.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had an article where you had the coaches' reactions, and if you really read it, I think the bottom line is people could have articulated views for larger. Some people were disappointed. They think Division III, which is a big majority of it, and for now, proportionally a big percentage, and they may not be as well represented because they can't compete. At the end of the day, I like the coaches where the reaction was philosophical. Hey, our goal was to become an NCAA sport. We are. This is where we are. And many of them just said, kind of game on. We'll do the best we can, accept it, and see. Over time, it can get bigger. I would have liked to have seen 24. It is what it is. It's sanctioned. They have the rules out, and it is. What are you going to do about it, right? So, but it was interesting to see the perspectives, and everybody has their angle. But you have to grin and bear it and do the best you can. And I'm thankful that I remember when we first got involved in women's wrestling in 2013, when my daughter started, where it was. If you look at the number of states that were sanctioned, the number of colleges or universities that had a program, we have come a long way to get here. The people that were involved should be very proud of themselves, and they paved the way, and it's only going to get better over time, and it will tweak and evolve, but this is a great start, and I'm thankful that we have this tournament and we have 21.
And I just wonder if there's going to be a different vibe to the tournament as well, that you get to walk away and you get to have your trophy and you get to say you are an NCAA champion rather than an NCWWC champion. I don't know if letters make a difference. I know it's endorsed by that. It's a different feel, but to be able to say I was an NCAA champion for my university, I think there's something to that.
Yeah, maybe. And it kind of legitimizes it. But I remember reading one of the interviews when you were questioning some of the Lehigh athletes that are joining a club program, ultimately hoping that they, which they will, become an NCAA team. But it's you just compete where you are. They had to blaze trails in high school wrestling against the boys in unsanctioned state tournaments. So did it really matter? If there was no NCAA tournament, whatever the tournament was, the athletes did the best they can. They paved the way for the growth that led to this. So I don't want to take anything away from anybody in the past because it didn't have those exact initials. It was a national tournament. So to me, it's kind of cool, I guess. It's kind of cool to help the schools that the NCAA will pay. I'm sure there'll be more coverage, but I don't want to take away from anything that the ladies have done, winning what tournaments were there for them to win.
No doubt about it. I loved the WCWA where you had it all in
I
one,
loved it.
and now we're talking about breaking things off. I miss those days. I wish it was all in one pot and you had one big national champion, which is why I like the U.S. Open. But you're talking about Aubrey Krazer's comments there in
Yeah,
that article, and I thought
yeah,
she did a fantastic job of explaining that, and it was really a light bulb moment what she said because she's talking about how we've just been prepared for this and breaking barriers and having to not have
right.
sanctioned women's championships this whole time. So that was really a moment where it really clicked for me, and that really opened up the story, her comments.
Yeah, it was good to see the comments from the younger athletes and their perspective on things and what they've had to go through and deal with, and just the way they look at it. That was a good article, and there were great comments by her.
Scott, we've mentioned Lehigh as a possibility of adding D1 women's wrestling. Tarleton State, maybe Columbia, you've heard that. Now Oklahoma State is a program they are talking about as potential. You look at the recruiting class they have for a club program. Nothing set in stone by any means, but I would think if there's that much talent going to Oklahoma State, they have to be serious about adding a Division I women's wrestling program.
Yeah, I mean, where there's smoke, there's fire. I'm sure the conversations are happening, whether they're above, below, or under the table. But yeah, the high level wrestlers we're talking about probably wouldn't go unless there's I don't say assurances, but probably close to that. I think it would be great if Oklahoma State and then give Lehigh, Iowa, just put more pressure. Where kind of Dan Gable made some comments. Come on, where is everybody? Iowa did it. This is all great, but let's get on board with the Power Four schools. So it's going to happen. I don't know when, but it would be a good next step to see Oklahoma State with the storied tradition they have.
Because if you have Oklahoma State, and it's again, this is the women's path, they need to do it their way. But it's impossible to ignore what's happened on the men's side. So you have 34 NCAA championships for the men at Oklahoma State, 24 for Iowa. It's historically this iconic rivalry between these two programs that will carry over to the women's programs as well. So to have Iowa, Oklahoma State, it's
I
a
can't
dream come
imagine.
true.
I think that dual meet would be insanity the first time. You be like whether it's in Carver, Hawkeye, Gallagher. I think it would be nuts the first one.
But then if you do add Lehigh, you get Columbia. I don't think you should sleep on Tarleton State either. Jason Mormon has shown he can win team championships. You're in Texas, a hotbed for women's wrestling. I think he can do something special there because he is such an established coach. He has a formula. I wouldn't count them out.
That program will be significant relatively quickly. He's a great recruiter. He's a great coach. His athletes like him. Uh, he's not going to have the resources necessarily of some of these other big names. However, I know that there was support, donor support, behind that program. So he's going to be, they're going to be in the game right out of the gate, to fairly soon.
Now we just got to get them, Scott. Once we get this
Yeah,
rolling and you get
sure.
the programs we're talking about, I just think it's game on. And you really can't ignore the other programs that have built us to this point. North Central, McKendree, Grand Valley State's new on the scene. Still don't know what's going to happen there with Brett Fry and King. I know he's late to the party on the recruiting. A lot of the recruits were already coming in, so he got delayed in what he could do there. But he has that Wyoming Seminary pipeline, so you have to think he's going to be recruiting that in. So we'll see what King University can do. And
Yeah,
you don't want to forget Presbyterian, Sacred Heart, Lindenwood. They're still D1
yeah,
programs. Delaware State's adding. So there's just a lot of synergy right now. A lot of
yeah.
good things happening.
And if Menlo moves to Division 1, they'll have the local, recruiting turf of California. McKendree is going to have very good lightweight, so it's fun that people will be competing. It's going to be tough, against the quote resources of Iowa, the Power Four, but it's especially once you shrink. I think the other thing we didn't really talk about was when you go to 10 only as opposed to 15, the game changes. So it's I don't know. Some second stringers might like the allure of Iowa and be willing to be there anyway, but a lot of the good wrestlers don't want to be second string and not compete. So that'll be interesting. So I think that'll make it more challenging. If you have X amount of athletes and you recruit, but people don't think they can start right away, you make a mistake or two and your recruits underperform, the door's open. The game gets trickier. It really does.
I'm still convinced of this that even if it's 3-4 deep, attention is the name of the game right now. Attention is the new currency. And although it's nice to be All Americans, to say you're an Iowa wrestler, to have that Hawkeye singlet on, that's going to carry so much weight going forward to be able to tell people that. And we reinforce this, you're an absolute rock star when you're in Iowa City. I just don't think there's going to be this mass exodus that people might think it will happen.
I don't know. You and I disagree on this a little bit, and we've talked about it. I don't know if it's going to necessarily be an exodus for people that are there in terms of going to the portal and changing if they have another year or two. And I say this as a Hawkeye diehard fan. I've always been in my life, so I'm not being negative about Iowa. I promise you, I'm a Hawkeye fan. But if you're a recruit and you're a top recruit that's one or two in the nation, and there's somebody 2 years ahead of you that's winning nationals to take us. You do not want to sit behind them for 2 years. I promise you. Anybody that's good enough to be a one or two recruit, a top 10 recruit, expects themselves. Well, some of them will say, I don't care, I'll beat that person, maybe. But many of them will say, I want to make sure I'm starting out of the gate. So I'm not so sure people can be maybe some will be content to be number two, but the really good ones won't, in my opinion.
Well, okay, let's take Naomi Simon as an example. So she could redshirt next year. She was a freshman. She got third place. We've talked about how high level she is. So she's going to be behind Kylie Welker no matter what. So she could redshirt next year. Kylie will have that spot for her senior year, so she'll have to be second string there. I just think being from Decorah, Iowa, being in that program, I just think the allure of being a Hawkeye, she's going to stay.
Well, she might. Welker doesn't have 4 full years, and She's from Iowa, so that's a a special city. Everybody isn't from Iowa though, and has the local allure, and and she knows what it is, right? Because she knows, Welker's good, Welker's Welker, and you could almost excuse being behind her, and she could also say, "I'm gonna get to wrestle her every day in the room." But I think a lot of people, you know, when there's other programs, are not just going to be content to be number two. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, and how many times do we talk about 110 and they are four deep right now?
I mean,
Nyla Valencia,
yeah,
Emily Gonzalez, Ava Bayless, Val
okay,
Solorio. What's
yeah.
going to happen there?
Yeah, well, I asked Bellamere how happy was she was, not being number one, not starting. So she went to North Central and then won the national title, right?
Second to
Oh,
Macy
second. I'm
Gilpin.
sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, but but my point is that she didn't like being not the number one. So in the room, and I think it's up to the individual. But I think a lot, wrestling is a very type A sport, and by definition, we tend not to have people, the ones that are top recruits, that want to be behind somebody, unless it's for maybe a year.
Definitely a storyline we are going to follow. Scott, we have to learn about your recent trip to Arizona. You got to see Valiant Prep and what they have going on there. I'm fascinated on what you learned about the system and what Angel Cejudo is doing in this remarkable program.
Yeah, it was really eye-opening and really special. I was in Vegas for a work situation a week after the Open, and I popped in Arizona to see Michaela, and I went in that room, and I've heard great things, and Michaela loves it, it's very comfortable. Um, but it was just kind of mind-boggling, really, because what first of all, it's a school where, and to understand this is kind of really weird. Everybody in the school wrestles, okay, no matter male or female, younger and older ages. So everybody's there to wrestle. When Angel Cejudo, who was very welcoming, who Michaela loves, gave me a tour of the school. He walks in a Kayla Miracle's math class, and you see like a big kind of stuffed wrestling shoe on a chair. Throughout the hallways, you'll see Fargo stop signs, wrestling pictures. So it's an unbelievable environment to begin with. And then you go in the wrestling room, and I've never been, in like the Dagestan room. I've been in a fair amount of wrestling rooms in my life, and it's like just a love of the sport. And to begin with, you have the Larkin family, where Eric Larkin coaches there. He's got his three boys are there. Angel Cejudo's two sons, Pablito and Adrian, are in there. His daughter Genesis would be in there. So you have like a family, and then a family. And it really feels that way. Everybody just loves wrestling, and how, like, especially if you're a female wrestler, like, and you're in high school and you have Kayla Miracle in the room, Helen Maroulis. I mean, you see Everest Lideckers, after practice, Helen's working on something with her. They're wrestling live. And what people do is, after practice, you think that it was kind of a long practice, like a 2 hours, but it's not like just running into the wall. It's technique, it's playing around with stuff. And after, you see everybody sitting on the side talking, and which is the way Thomas Gilman described the Dagestan room. And next thing you know, they're back in positions wrestling. So everybody, there's parents that are watching practices. I talked to Lidecker's father, other parents. It's just a special place. Angel is phenomenal. He made, Henry was in the room, his brother, two-time UFC champion, two weights, Olympic gold medalist. And yeah, Henry's done all these things, but Angel is changing lives. And all these athletes, many of them are not, from, wealthy, comfortable economic families, or from families that might struggle. These boys all love wrestling. They all work with the girls. They work with each other. They will have opportunities to get scholarships, both all the boys and the women. They're very technical. It was just an environment that words don't really do justice to it. It's just so kind of welcoming and family oriented to each other. They've all been very successful. It's a great room. And it's because they all, it's not like you're trying to kill each other. It's a room of technique, wrestling, thought, love. It's very hard to describe. And what Larkin, Cejudo, and the other coaches have done, I mean, was talking to one of the girls, and and then one of the boys, and Kayla Miracle's their math teacher, and then they see her in practice, and just to have these high level people that love wrestling, and Helen, and it's just unbelievable. And Angel, you showed me, we were in a classroom. He's got these boards with all the techniques written out, what he wants to work on, all the periodization for aerobic and anaerobic strength and conditioning. It just was a phenomenal environment. I don't know if I'm describing it well or not. It's kind of overwhelming, and it was just amazing. And, my daughter's been in a lot of wrestling rooms in a lot of places. They've all been pretty good wrestling rooms with exceptional talent. And this just, to me, was, the Iowa wrestling was sacred ground. In Long Island, Volga Rouge's room's amazing. Volga's a great guy, and it was very combative, physical, but great room. But this room just has an environment of kind of family and love in a different way that was just amazing.
And the way you're describing it, doesn't it feel like all of what's happening is embedding wrestling and all the concepts into your DNA? It's just it's like right here.
Yeah, it's and if somebody cares about it, they have talent, it's like by osmosis, you're going to get that vibe and just the appreciation. You see, Angel Fruta talks about wrestling, gives me a tour. He's smiling all the time. He loves it, and Larkin's a great coach. And there's many assistant coaches, fighters will come back. Everybody kind of wants to be in that room. Josh Kramer trains in the room. Lee Pritz coaches in that room, but, he's an ASU coach who works with my daughter and Kayla. So it's just and Helen, it's just a unique place. And the idea that it's a school is just the coolest thing in the world. I would have died and gone to heaven if I could have gone to high school where everybody wrestled. And it's not just a high school. It's many ages. I don't know exactly where it starts.
Let's have a follow-up to our levels conversation from last show. It won't be the last time we talk about levels, but one of the nuances I think we have to describe is we described it as 1 to 100 and where you are on those levels. 90s is elite level, and then 100 is just beyond anything. That's a sacred space to get up to. We kind of said Helen and probably Amit are at that level for American women's freestylers. But just because you might be at a 90, let's say you're a 90 in wrestling someone who is a 70, or an 80 wrestling a 70, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to dominate in the way that an 80 could. So you may have a headlock and you may have a skill set that allows for you to be dominant. The 90 might be patient, take position, doesn't get out of position. And if you were watching that, you might say, the 80 just dominated the 70. That person's gonna, smoke the 90 if you don't know better. It doesn't work that way. I've seen so many scenarios where it might be 1 to 1 or 1 to 0, and it's like, wow, they're going really close. It's a good match, and then they just open the doors the second period. So
yeah,
it's just all about those little details about how wrestling is executed.
Yeah, well, the high 90s to 100 don't, they're in position for most of the match, and they'd rather be patient, not sacrifice. To quote Lee Miracle again, position for points. They're very disciplined. A great example of that is from Japan, and she's not the biggest name. She's only a 3-time world champ, senior, and 1 age group world championship as a cadet junior. And U23 is Haruna Okuno, where she can wrestle. She's beaten Sarah. She's beaten Jakara in world finals, where she may only be up 2-0 or 3, and then it's just methodical. And then the points will start to come on. She's very patient, not making mistakes. When she attacks, she finishes, and it's very hard to score on her. And that what makes her, a 90 to 100. And then the crazy thing is, then Fujinami wrestles her when she's 17 at Texas Akuno. So that's, Akuno will be 100 plus. Fujinami, but to do that to 100, but it's same thing. Helen's not going to really make mistakes unless she's kind of opening up. But the really good, and I would argue, when you saw Kayla wrestle, Miracle wrestle Adugo, it may have only been 4-0, but they were good, fireman's carries that maybe one of them could have been a feet to back, but Adugo really didn't come close to scoring. She got it on her leg, maybe looked like she might, but Kayla was able to stalemate it. And it's deceptive. You have to understand the levels and understand what the people are trying to do to really appreciate what a high 90s to 100 how they wrestle.